All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to each and every one of you. I do believe that we are currently live. Excuse me for being a little out of sorts as we start this. I've I just got upstairs. My brother and I were talking about exorcisms and demonic possessions and stuff because I've been watching this podcast from a guy that wrote a book on aliens and alien visitations, and it's fascinating. Let's just say that. Stephen Real, how you doing? Francho, how you doing, sir? Uh, okay, I'm back. I am with you guys now. I hope that all of you are doing incredibly well. It is, of course, Thursday. I think it's Thursday. Am I correct? Yes, it is Thursday. And we have to talk. We have to talk about a lot of things. There's a lot of things that's been happening in South Africa since last I saw all of you. DNX, how you doing, sir? Greetings to you as well. It is a cold and rainy Thursday here in the Western Cape. Cape Town is miserable at the moment, which I love, but nevertheless. Vikas, how you doing, sir? Môre, nou net middag, Steven. Middag. I'm very happy to be here with all of you. Of course, as they say, bad news is good news for someone, and it is good news for us because we get to discuss the stupidity of our government, which I always say it's sort of a bittersweet thing for me because when our government does stupid things, I immediately think, oh, content. And then I realize, wait, I live here. Their stupid shit is going to affect me, which makes it less fun. So it's always a bit of a give and take whenever we deal with our government. Orange Swifty, how you doing, sir? Henk, how you doing, sir? Good morning to you from Nebraska. All Vrystaat here. Wow, sir, happy to have you here. Vikas, thank you so much for the 140 Rand donation. Truly appreciate you, sir. Thank you. You're far too kind. David, how you doing, sir? Dalk net ek, maar jou klank gaan af en weer aan. Guys, how's the sound on your end? Good, bad? What's going on? Tasting. Can you guys hear me, or is the sound actually problematic at the moment? Recently, and I say recently, it's been two days now that I've switched to black coffee instead of milky coffee. It's a struggle. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. I'm having not the world's best time. If Stefan, if that is happening, just do a reload on your stream. YouTube and YouTube stuff, obviously, not always that great. Just joined. The sound is good. Atomic, very happy to hear that, sir. Welcome. Wheelie Luke, how you doing, sir? Let's hope it goes great today. Sounds perfect to me. I'm happy to hear that. DNX, the problem is milk for me. Turns out milk, quite allergic to it, and it just trying to get off it. Lianka, how you doing? Thank you very much. I appreciate you guys answering the question. Okay, so I told you that it was going to be a discussion about the stupidity in South Africa. Well, at least that's the title of the stream. And yes, there is a lot of stupidity that is currently happening in South Africa. Insofar as I guess, which one do we start with? Because I originally wanted to start with the main story, but now I'm sort of thinking maybe let's get the boring story out of the way, and then we can talk about the main story. Because I think, I mean, I don't find this boring, but a lot of people do find it boring. And so we'll start with the story that most people find boring, even though I actually like economic news and I like economic discussions. Doesn't know your weakness now. What's new from the clown mafia? Oh man. It's not the stupidity that gets me, but more the arrogance. Oh yeah, like I think the problem with South Africa, in no uncertain terms, the problem in South Africa is the stupidity to the level of the arrogance is absolutely unheard of. You know, it's one thing to deal with someone that isn't necessarily that smart, that knows that they're not that smart. It's a whole different ball game when you're dealing with someone that isn't that smart, but they think that they're incredibly intelligent. They think that they have it all down. They think that they have the right answer at the right time. And the rest of us are sort of looking at this going, wait, are you paying attention to your surroundings in any way, shape, or form? Are you reading the room, so to speak? So let's start with what was supposed to be the second story of the stream. But I'm going to start with this because the other story I think we're going to be spending a lot more time on. So, the South African government. Now, I need to paint the picture. I need to set the scene for all of you before we get into the actual story, although you can see the actual story on your screen. So, the South African economy has not grown since 2008. In fact, and this is something that very few people ever really focus on, the average growth of the South African economy was about 1.6 to 1.9% under Jacob Zuma, and it has fallen to about 0.9% under Cyril Ramaphosa. Now, that is economic growth or GDP growth that is sort of calculated using GDP as well as the economy, as well as business growth and confidence and all the rest of it to determine what is the actual growth. But now, when you compare that, or when you just look at that, you go, okay, well, there's a little growth. It's not nothing. Well, when you actually compare that and take into consideration population growth on top of economic growth in this country, we are borderline, uh, not just in a recession, but in a depression recession, I want to say. Because depression is just depressed growth. A recession is when you're growing backwards. So you're not growing at all, you're actually shrinking. So South Africa is in a depressed growth state. But as a result of our incredibly high population growth, which consistently aims at around 2 to 2.5%, or 1.6% in total terms, but that excludes illegal immigrants coming into the country. When you include illegal immigrants as well as native born South Africans, uh, our economy is actually shrinking, not growing. It's getting smaller. And that is because the pie remains largely the same, but the people that now need to feed on the pie, that is growing significantly faster. Now, as a result of this, and there's going to be many things that affect this. Night of Justice, how you doing? Saint, how you doing, sir? Science, how you doing, bro? There's many things that, as a result of this, becomes an increasing problem. So, for example, job creation. You want to at least grow your economy so that job creation keeps up with population growth. At least. That's sort of for a country that wants to stagnate and not go anywhere. It needs to at least be able to do that. If you can't keep up with that, what's going to end up happening is every single year, your country will add new people to the job force because people turn 18, they finish school, and now they want to go work. But there's no jobs for those people that are now entering the workforce to actually go in and work. Now, what a lot of people will tell you is that this is going to lead to crime. This is going to lead to more, XYZ. The truth is, this only leads to poverty. That does not lead to crime. In fact, if you look at every single study that has ever been done on this that tries to prove that poverty is what leads to crime, if you actually read the study, you see that they tend to prove the opposite. Night of Justice with the 5 community subs, really appreciate you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And the answer to their proof is in the methodology. So what they do is they look at the areas that are the most haunted by crime, and then they go, well, look at these areas. They're very poor. Therefore, poverty creates crime. In reality, and this is where someone like Thomas Sowell comes in, because he's actually done the work on this, and I thank him for it because it means I don't have to do it. I just needed to fact check him, and turns out true. So Harlem in New York. Harlem is a very poor area in New York, and it is very dangerous. You would not want to be living in Harlem in any way, shape, or form because you will get mugged. You will probably get murdered. It's a very gang rich area. Now, Harlem was actually one of the safest areas in New York City for quite a while, where people grew, raised their families, but it was always a poor area. Harlem was never an area with a lot of affluence because it was historically a black area. And therefore, businesses didn't really enter there, didn't really open there. But they opened their own businesses. They had their own barber shops and their own stores. And, so it was a fairly safe and decent neighborhood, but not a very rich neighborhood. Then came the liberal policies. Now, liberal policies are all about making people feel good. And so, very quickly, you had policies that suggested that when the police encounter people in Harlem, maybe don't arrest them, maybe don't be mean to them, because, if people feel like they belong, they'll just automatically become super successful. As a result of this, criminals moved in because criminals realized that if I live in Harlem, I don't have to worry too much. I can pretty much do whatever I want. Very quickly, Harlem turned into a crime hotspot. And as crime increased, guess what happened? Businesses decreased because no business wants to open in a crime hotspot. And before you know it, Harlem was a destitute, poor, going nowhere, full of crime and gangsterism neighborhood. This is the result of left wing politics. That's what happens when your economy starts to go into decline. Poverty increases, and combined with left-wing policies, crime and all the rest just exacerbate the problem. And I think most of us looking around South Africa realizes that this is happening. Now, there's another part of this that is just as bad, and that is that at the same time that South Africa's economy isn't growing, our government appears to be incapable. And I know there's plenty of economists out there that praises this government for their fiscal uh, uh, restraint and their fiscal discipline. The truth is that that discipline really only exists sort of in the periphery. The discipline isn't carried through. Effectively, what we have in South Africa is a government that spends its money as if it's a rich first world country up to a point. And then once that point is reached, the government doesn't go further. So, in that sense, they're responsible. But effectively, what this would be is, and if I can use myself as the example here, it would be like me saying, guys, you know what? I, as a man, I'm very disciplined in what I eat. Very disciplined in what I eat. Like every single day, I eat two pizzas. I eat 2 liters. I don't actually eat like this, but for the example, it works. I eat two pizzas every single day. I drink 2 liters of Coke every single day. I have a pint of ice cream every single day, but then no more. No more. I will not exceed that. That's all I eat. Now, you and I would both sit there and listen to me and go, I don't think you understand what disciplined eating is. Like it feels like you're preparing for an eat as much as you can competition, except the competition isn't arriving and you're never actually taking a break. Like, sure, you're stopping yourself once you're ready to throw up, but that still doesn't mean that you're actually practicing discipline. You look at the state, for example, and you look at the immense amount of overemployment that is happening. It's calculated at the moment that the South African government has about 60% too many employees. In other words, we could have fired 60% of all of the employees in government, and none of the functions of government would actually cease to operate. Government would just do what government does without, with 60% less employees. The government spends money frivolously on all manner of stuff, But because the government doesn't turn on the printing presses and goes into massive financial debt, the economists of South Africa go, well, at least they're very disciplined in how they deal with the fiscus and with the fiscal availability that we have. The truth, however, is that nothing could be further from the truth. So South Africa at this point owes a lot of money. I'm not even going to give you the number because no one actually can calculate that number. And the reason no one can calculate the number is no one really knows how much the municipalities owe. We know what the South African government owes, and we're at about 95, almost 90% of debt to GDP ratio. If you include the municipalities, that number goes significantly higher. The problem is we don't actually know what the municipalities owe because municipalities are able to make loans from the World Bank and from Europeans and so on and so forth without necessarily having to refer it to the national government. So it could be much higher, it could be slightly higher. We just don't know. The fact is, the official number sits at between 85 and 90% of GDP. Now, as a result of this, we pay a lot of money to service this debt. Because, yes, if you have debt, you have to service it. Anyone that has a credit card knows what that feels like. As soon as your paycheck hits your bank, the bank goes, excuse me, we think some of that is ours. And then you go, damn it, this is rough, right? But that's the reality. This is what happens to South Africa. Right now, it costs South Africa around 1 billion rand a day. That's a day, 1 billion a day to service the debt, not pay it back. We're not paying back debt. Governments don't really do paybacks. We're just servicing the debt. So we're paying the interest on the debt that we currently have. That's 1 billion a day. I've already made videos about this multiple times explaining how that eventually becomes a serious problem because every billion that you spend servicing debt is a billion that you will have to borrow later on. So next year we'll have to borrow 365 billion rand just to make up the shortfall of the budget for what we've lost last year in servicing the debt. This means that this year we're already starting at 365 billion rand less in the budget than what we had last year, which means we're now going to have to borrow even more, which means that borrowing cost just goes up and you're sort of in this just endless downward spiral that continues to happen. Okay, so since we have this phenomenal government that is apparently so disciplined in how they spend the billions of rands that they seemingly get from the taxpayers, of course, none of that money is given freely. That money is extracted violently from the population. Um, because of their discipline, inflation has risen. So this is the first bit of bad news for all of you. If you own a car, if you own a home, there's some bad stuff about to happen. This is probably going to happen this afternoon. I believe that the central bank or the Reserve Bank of South Africa is meeting this afternoon to discuss because inflation has risen to almost 5%. I believe it's just over or just under 5%. I haven't looked into it that fully yet. It was focused on other stories before the stream. But it's just under or just over 5%. That's up from 4.5%. That's headline inflation. Now, when I say headline inflation, what you can look at, and I do apologize for this word, but there really is no other word in the English language that describes it better. That's bullshit inflation. Okay, so that's the inflation that the government is willing to tell the public about. That's not real inflation. So this changed around the 1980s. Before the 1980s, what the government would do is they would have a basket of goods, and this basket of goods was decided upon in order to figure out what is inflation. So what that meant was if you had butter in your basket of goods in the 1980s. In the 1990s, you would take the exact same, package and the exact same quantity of butter, and you would compare 1991's butter price to 1981's butter price to tell what is the inflation of butter been since 1981. This would give you a pretty good oversight of what is the price. Then governments realized, oh wait, this really sends a bad sort of picture to the public of how much we're screwing up the economy. And this is sort of it's sort of nice because when governments decided this was around the same time that the globalist movement really started taking off. But effectively, what they did was they opted for an adaptive basket of goods. So what that means is if, for example, you're the government and you're looking at beef prices, so the price of steak, and you go, whoa, steak is way too expensive now. We don't think people will buy steak. So we're just going to exclude steak from this year's basket of goods. Instead, we're going to look at chicken. Or if chicken, pork, beef, and ostrich and everything is too expensive, we'll just leave meat out of the basket entirely because it's too expensive. People won't be able to buy that. We'll use meat alternatives. Basically, we'll fidget with the budget with the basket of goods to what we think people can buy. So if butter is way too expensive now, we'll just replace it with margarine. And there you go. People are using margarine. The price actually didn't go up at all. So what this does is it gives you a very skewed picture of actual inflation, because actual inflation, of course, it doesn't really work that way. Most people, if people are not buying steak, it's not because they don't want to buy steak. It's because they can no longer afford it because inflation has gotten so bad that they can physically no longer buy steak and still have money left over at the end of the month. That is inflation. That's what inflation is. Nevertheless, headline inflation in South Africa is 5% at the moment. Anyone that's been in a supermarket literally over the last year knows that it's not just 5%. I remember early last year, a block of butter cost me about 72 Rand for 500 grams of butter. It's now over 90 Rand. Same shop, same butter. I don't know about you. I'm not a great mathematician. I don't have like a degree in mathematics, but I don't think from 70 to 90 is a 5% increase. I don't know. I'm not a mathematician, as I said, but it feels like that's not a 5% increase. That feels much higher. Nevertheless, we're at 5%. What does this mean? Well, it means that interest rates are going to go up. That's what the Reserve Bank will be meeting on this afternoon. So probably tomorrow morning, you're going to wake up and interest rates are going to be higher. This means if you own a car, if you own a home, if you have any sort of debt whatsoever, your debt is about to get much more expensive because your interests will go up. And as a result of this, you'll be struggling a little bit more. Baked beans, $6.99 today, $12.69. Yeah, but that's just 5%, Obi. It's not 5%, but it is just 5%, right? You know what happens when debt is paid off? The loan repayment becomes savings and potential investment. Just imagine a government in a fiscal positive. What a thought. So, Siege Gardens, let me just start with the following. You don't have to have a positive budget, right? Governments don't have to make profits. In fact, government debt isn't really a problem at all. Government debt is only really a problem to people that want to make a point. Outside of that, governments can have debt, and there's really it's actually quite healthy for a government to have some measure of debt. And some inflation is also good. You do need some inflation. And the reason for it is as time goes on, people will earn more money. This is just natural, or at least this is how it should be. People should be earning more money. The problem is that if money never loses any of its value, eventually you'll end up with a crash in the system because everyone will just turn out to be millionaires. And if everyone is millionaires, then no one's a millionaire. and then the system will crash. So there is some that's good. What we are at now at 5%, not good at all. Of course, it gets even worse if your economy isn't even growing at the rate of your inflation, which is effectively what you want. So if you have 5% inflation, you need 5% economic growth, because the two offputs one another. And as a result of that, your economy continues to grow. So when you actually include inflation as well as economic growth in this country, as well as population growth, turns out South Africa's economy really isn't growing. Now, okay, with all of that being said, the government decided, in their infinite wisdom, to borrow another 25 billion rand from the World Bank. And the government says that this 25 billion rand donation, or loan, I should say, sorry, not a donation, will create 600,000 jobs. Now, let me ask this. How many of you think that this 25 billion rand loan from the World Bank will create 100 jobs? Let alone 600,000, just 100 jobs. Do you think that that can actually happen? Let me just, I want to show you guys something, because this just adds to the comedy of South Africa. Um, Great jobs. Jobs are just getting less day by day. True. Amazed how economists state inflation is good. Putting R1 on a leaf of bread is cruel. Obi, as I said, some inflation is necessary. If you don't have inflation, what will ultimately happen is you'll end up with deflation. And that is, if inflation is like a cancer to an economy, deflation is like a heart attack, right? Economies are not designed, at least modern economies are not designed for deflation, which might hint at the fact that we need to change the way we think about economies. But nevertheless, deflation is because effectively what happens in deflation is your money now actually gains value, right? So if you have a deflationary rate of 10%, say for example, that means that if you received a paycheck last month of 10,000, this month you're not just receiving 10,000, you're receiving 10,000 plus 1,000. So you're actually making 11,000. But as a result of that, all products are also falling in price. And now what ends up happening is you end up with way too much money in the system. And all of that money in the system ultimately just leads to a crash within the system. So you do want some inflation so that you can effectively offput economic growth to a percentage of that inflation, right? This is why I said having your economic growth at the same rate as your inflation. So if you have those two in equal measure, what ends up happening is people do get richer over time, but they get rich over time slowly enough that the system doesn't break. Because you don't want everyone to get rich in your economy immediately. As much as that might sound good, it will be devastating to the economy as a whole. You do need people on different earning brackets. And inflation just allows you to kind of balance out over the long term how people get rich and how people make money. But you do need economic growth as a result of this. But okay, let me show you guys the comedy of error. So Hey, wow, an USA question. Jade, I will answer your questions in a second. Let me put them on the screen so that I have them here. But before we get going, let me just finish the comedy, and then I'll ask some questions. I'll answer some questions. But okay, so the government is borrowing 25 billion rand. The government told the World Bank that this money is going for infrastructure and railway spending. That's why the World Bank lent South Africa the money. Now, there's a couple of issues with this. From So let's first talk about the philosophical reason why the government is doing this. Philosophically, almost every government in the world adheres to uh what's his name now? Oh, name escapes me. You have the Hayek model, and then you have the other model. Uh, I always mix these two up. Someone in chat, my brain's just not firing at the moment. You have the Hayek model, and then you have the other guy. Um, it'll come to me. I'll remember it in a second. But effectively, the model that the world decided. So one of the models goes and says, government can't create wealth, government can't create economic growth. Only the private sector can do that. So the government's job should be to try and enable the private sector to make as much money as possible so that economic growth is possible, so that jobs can be created, so on and so forth. Now, both of these writers wrote in the time of depression. And so their argument was, in order to get out of a depression, what should you do? So the one argues you should open the market so that more businesses can operate, and the businesses will get you out of the slump, the economic depression. The other argues, no, no, no. Government should just spend more money. Government should do all sorts of infrastructure bills and infrastructure spending, and that will ultimately make everyone richer in the economy. So all governments in the Western world, and really in the Eastern world, adheres to the infrastructure spending, right? We're going to borrow money, we're going to build railways and build bridges, and then we're all going to be super rich because we're creating jobs. Of course, that's not really how it works, because government is Keynesian. Thank you, Saint Trugler. That's the one. Yes, you had Hayek and you had Keynesian. The Keynesian model and the Hayekian model. Keynes, Keynesy was the one that, if I remember correctly, as I said, I always mix these two up. But Keynesy was the one that said infrastructure bulls, and Hayek, I think, was the one that said free markets. But at the end of the day, that's not really important. The important part here is the governments of the world went with the one that gives them the most power. And that's the one where they get to spend, and the economy is supposed to grow. But because government is highly inefficient, just from the natural order of things, whatever government builds takes twice as long, three times as long, and costs three times as much. You end up not really ever creating that growth. And I can explain it to you logically. If the government borrows 25 billion, government doesn't have its own money. All government money is an extraction from the population. So it's the people that have to pay that money. When a business is opened and a business decides to build a road, an ordinary business decides to build a road, that business goes to the bank and borrows money from the bank in order to build the road. The business takes the money that it borrowed from the bank and it employs people to build the road. It buys infrastructure and equipment to build the road. And ultimately, the road is built. And now the road is economically active, because no business is going to build a useless road. The business is building the road to go to a business. That road services the business, and that business now becomes an economically viable business to contribute to the economy. This is the money that goes into the economy from the bank, goes into the economy from the company into the workers. The workers deposit the money at the bank, and because there are more workers, these workers now pay taxes. The government gets more money, but also the economy gets more money, because all of these workers that work on the road now need to buy stuff from the businesses that are on this road. Therefore, everyone wins. When the government borrows money in order to do an infrastructure project, the government goes to a World Bank and it lends money. Now, the government doesn't have its own money. It's not making its own money. It's borrowing money. That money has to be repaid. What is this money repaid with? Well, taxes from the citizens. The very businesses that are meant to operate are the ones that's going to repay that loan. The government now employs a bunch of people, but these people are employed with other people's money. This is not the government's money. This is other people's money. So these people work for the government, but they're not being paid by the government. Not really. These people now make money, sure, from the government, but the money that they make just goes back into the economy and then goes back into taxes. So the system doesn't actually grow as a result of this money. If anything, the system depletes because of the money that the government borrows. The government also has to pay its own salaries. The government also has to pay its own administrative costs. And so if a business borrows 50 billion to build a road, the bulk of that money goes into building the road because it's salaries and all the rest of it. When the government borrows 50 billion to build a road, the bulk of that money actually goes into government in order to set up the system so that the road can even be built. And so you end up with overruns and all the rest of it. So it gets much more complicated when you actually go into the nitty-gritty details of it, but you can think of it like this. The country in the world with the highest tax to spend ratio, I believe, is Finland. And Finland, for every 1 rand, I'll use rand, but it's actually calculated in dollars, but it works out equal all the time. For every 1 rand that Finland collects in taxes, it spends in the economy about 44 or 45 cents. The rest is just salaries and government buildings and upkeep and stuff. It's not actually spent in the economy. And that's the highest in the world. By every metric, every other country is even worse than that. The average is something around 32 cents for every 1 rand that is collected in taxes actually gets spent on where you want it to be spent. In South Africa, for every 1 rand the government collects in taxes, it spends. Now, there's two figures here, and I want you to focus on both, but there's two figures. For every 1 rand the government spends, earns in taxes, the government of South Africa spends 1 rand 22. That's on everything: salaries, economy, everything. 1 rand 22. So by taxing the citizens, the government goes into debt. Now, here's what the government actually spends in the economy. It's around 12 cents, dependent on how you calculate it. If you calculate it based on the government's own figures, that includes all of the botched projects of the government, it's 12 cents. If you include only economically viable projects, it's actually closer to about 6 cents. For every 1 rand that is collected in taxes, the government spends around 6 cents on economically viable activities. So things that will make more money in the long run. So I'll quickly share this with you. 25 billion rand is going to be borrowed, or is borrowed by the from the World Bank in order to do infrastructure. So what exactly did our government achieve with some of the previous loans and stuff that they have done? So here we have 25 million rand that was spent on a multi-purpose sports facility, which is now an empty piece of land overgrown with weeds. That's the sports facility, by the way. 25 million. It's a field. But the 25 million was spent. They actually paid the money and nothing actually happened. Or let's look at this. 11 billion rand government project left buildings empty and stripped by criminals. Look at that. That's 11 billion. This is money that the government borrowed to build stuff with. Or let's look at this, where a municipality paid 16 million rand for 18 vehicles, but only received 7. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are already paying 1 billion rand a day to service the debt of our country, and our government, at an inflation rate of 5%, which is very high, we're approaching, if we're not already equal to the inflation that COVID created, which means our country still has not recovered from the COVID era shutdowns, the economic suicide that was COVID. Uh, at a time when most South Africans, I was reading an article about a month ago um, that showed, and this was actually scary. The article showed that I believe something like 70% of middle class South Africans live from credit card to credit card, credit card to credit card. 70%. Let that sink in. Here's another figure for you from that article. Of all the people that owe debt, these are personal loans, student loans, credit card loans, all of it, 40% of South Africans are in default, meaning they can't pay back the debt. Why is that? Well, because life in South Africa, along with the government's boot on everyone's neck, has become too expensive. People need to go into debt just to survive. I mean, as they're on their way to try and repay that debt, life is getting so expensive that they can just no longer do it. And here the government is borrowing another 25 billion rand for infrastructure spending. Spending that, as I've shown you, is probably not going to lead to anything actually being built. This, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, what you see on your screen right now, that's 25 billion with a B rand, or million, excuse me, this wasn't billion, this was million, million with an M. That's what 25 million rand buys you. It's kind of impressive, actually. I I, I don't know. How do you like? How do you? You know, like, does anyone understand this? Does it make sense to anyone? No, no one knows, right? And why is the World Bank not worried? Well, because they don't have to be. Because if South Africa can't repay the money, the World Bank will just put South Africa in default, and then South Africa will be forced to repay it. Correct, and they will audit you if you spend your money incorrectly. Echo, the thing is, this is where the World Bank has become ideologically captured, because that used to be the case. The World Bank would audit you if you didn't spend the money correctly. That's changed. Now the World Bank lends money to all sorts of ideological creations without really paying too much attention about anything. That is, of course, changing now with America tightening its belt and saying, look, we're no longer going to pay for your nonsense. Now the World Bank and others are starting to pay attention, but for the longest time, they didn't really care. Where is the Freedom Front Plus? Mum's the word. EP, at this point, or on this particular issue, I don't necessarily think the Freedom Front Plus can do much. Right. The fact is, the ANC has proven that they don't take instruction from anyone. They don't care what their GNU partners have to say. They don't care if you or I, don't agree. The ANC is on their own little mission, and their mission is, I think, a fugazi for everyone, including them. They don't even really know where they're headed. They're just sort of along for the ride. Um, so the economic close down and financial chaos that hit Neisner 2020, 25th March, as in so many towns, it was unreal devastation, never seen before, happened so fast. Well, the biggest issue here is that countries don't go broke overnight. It's a slow rolling process. The issue is that when it gathers speed, as it will inevitably do, that's when it becomes very fast. You look at Weimar Germany, for example. people saw the warning signs of what Weimar Germany was up to and what they were doing, and they could see the catastrophe that was about to hit. But it wasn't until the whole thing came crashing down that the people who did it started to realize what they had ultimately done. Even though you can see the warning signs. And now, many people will point to Davi Ruet or to any of the handful of other economists in South Africa that have been warning about what's happening in South Africa. And I've seen this. I've seen this in my own videos where people go, oh, he's just always complaining about where South Africa is going. He's just always warning. He's a fear monger or whatever. But remember, when you can see the signs of where the economy is going, that doesn't mean that you're predicting the economy is going to crash tomorrow. It just means that you're saying if you continue on this road, there is a cliff. As economists, they don't really know where that cliff is, but they know that there is a cliff. And that's sort of the difficulty of economics, because with economics, you are dealing sort of in darkness. You know that certain policies lead to prosperity and certain policies lead to ruin. You don't exactly know how prosperous policies can make you or how much ruin can come and how fast it can happen. So I can tell you, if you want success in South Africa, you have to open the business environment, allow more business to operate. You have to let go of BEE. You have to let go of affirmative action. You have to abolish EE. You have to abolish Bala. You have to increase the education sector and make education a priority in South Africa. And then you will start making money, right? And the economy will grow. Can I tell you by how much the economy will grow? No. Can I tell you how long it's going to take you to get rich? No, because I don't know, right? There's no way to know. I can tell you that it will happen, but I don't know how long or how fast. It's the same with bad decisions. I can tell you that your bad decisions are going to ruin you. I just don't know how long it's going to take. It's sort of like the same thing with drinking, right? If you drink every night of your life, as a doctor can tell you, you're going to develop liver disease, right? That's going to happen. You're drinking too much. You could ask the doctor, well, when is that going to happen? And the doctor isn't going to be able to tell you when, but the doctor knows that if you continue this drinking, it is going to happen. And as is usually the case, it happens very fast, faster than what you think. So if you're going to do the whole, well, I'll stop when it starts, it's going to be too late by the time you stop. So there's that's sort of what the economy is, because it's a chaotic system. It's a very difficult, it's a complex system, is what they call it. Complex meaning we don't really understand it. It's very difficult, but we do know enough to know you're on a bad road. And that's where South Africa is. Jade, okay, so on to your question. You said you wanted to ask me about WoW, and then you wanted to ask me about the USA. So shoot, sir. What did you want to ask me about the USA and about World of Warcraft? Scattered Sheep, how you doing, sir? No, I don't necessarily know if a new political party will fix anything. Depends on the new political party. If you have a political party that is actually conservative and actually capitalist and actually believes in the free market, then yes, maybe. But I don't see any political parties like that large enough to actually get into power. The Freedom Front Plus might be free market. They might be for freedom, liberty, and the rule of law, but they're too small, and they're going to remain small. I know, Ronaldo Gous and others believe that this is the year of the Freedom Front Plus. It's not going to happen. Not like I do think the Freedom Front Plus is going to grow. I think the Freedom Front Plus might be looking at 3, maybe even 4% of the total vote, but they're not going to get to 20%. Right now, that's just not going to happen. More knowledgeable people means more growth, but knowledge is dangerous. So socialism, yeah. Atomic, the thing is, knowledge is useless without wisdom. In fact, the worst thing you can do is give an idiot knowledge. Because if I have knowledge that your heart is a problem if you have pains shooting in your left arm. So I have that knowledge. That does not mean that I am perfectly qualified to operate on your heart. And if I'm an idiot, I might go fetch me my knife and a lighter. I've got this, right? I have the knowledge. I know it's somewhere in the heart that is the problem. So I'm just going to cut open your chest, break it open with a hammer, and just squeeze your heart until it operates, right? Because I have the knowledge. I know it's in the heart. Wisdom is knowing it's in the heart. We need someone smarter than me to figure that out because that's a problem. So yeah, knowledge doesn't mean much without wisdom. And I would say in South Africa, the biggest issue we have is a severe lack of wisdom. Young people, for example, have no wisdom whatsoever. Our politicians have no wisdom whatsoever. The Breitbart Doctrine says politics is downstream from culture. The culture in SA needs to change, not a political change. Scatter sheep, you are correct, right? Insofar as I do 100% agree that politics is downstream from culture. It starts with the culture. In this instance, though, I would say there is a particular cancer in the South African mind that might take a while to fix, uh, but I don't think it's impossible. So I actually think, broadly speaking, the culture of South Africa is actually a relatively good one. You look, for example, one of the things that's fascinating to me, South Africa is not a very um, radical country. We have radicals, but it's not a very radical country. The vast majority of South Africans are not radical. That's why the EFF is below 10%, and why MK has only really been able to make inroads with the Zulu people. And the Zulu people aren't voting for Zuma because they want a radical change. The Zulus just always vote for the Zulus because they vote for anyone that promises to leave them alone. And because Zuma is a Zulu, he understands he needs to leave the Zulu people alone, right? And so long as he does that, the Zulu people will support him. Um, but by and large, the overwhelming majority of South Africans are very moderate in almost every approach. This is what makes the ANC's rule such a strange phenomena, because the ANC, by every metric, is not a moderate party. It's a very radical party. But the ANC managed to destroy history and rewrite it to favor them. I'll give you a great example. This morning, I'm watching a podcast. I will not even begin to try and pronounce this guy's name, but he's a Dutch guy that actually went to Hong Kong and he read the actual documents of Mao and the Long March and the actual history of China, not through the leftist spin. And guess what? Communism at the height of Mao Zedong, when Mao Zedong and the communists seized power in China, about one in every 107,000 citizens in China was a communist. The majority of Chinese citizens were not communists. In fact, the majority of Chinese citizens were capitalists. But you see, Mao Zedong understood that if you change the history, you win. And that's what the ANC did. All of their atrocities, the thousands of black people that they killed who would not go along with the ANC. As hard as it is to believe, there were thousands of black people who did not mind apartheid because they were left alone. They could do their own thing, they could live their own lives. Now, please don't misunderstand here. I'm not making a defense for apartheid. I have a problem with apartheid, and it has nothing to do with the evil or mean treatment of people. I couldn't care less about that. That's history. All throughout history, my own family have stories of being mistreated by the Germans. This is why they fled. My own family have stories of being mistreated by the English. That is why they fought. Being mistreated, that's history. It happens to every single culture, every single tribe. So I don't care about that. It's water under the bridge. My problem with apartheid is purely that I do not believe that any government gets to tell people who they can and cannot associate with. I don't believe that that's in the realm of the government. I believe that my rights, and me and Martin van Staden actually discussed this, my right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is a God given right that is instilled from God to me. I am a sovereign person and I get to choose who am I friends with? Who do I marry? Who do I have children with? Where do I live? That's my choice. And I don't believe that any government anywhere in the world has the right to tell me who I can marry, where I can live, where I can walk, what time I need to be out. So, in that sense, I think apartheid was incredibly wrong because it robbed people, even white people, of the freedom to make their own choices and live the life that they wanted to live. I understand the reasons for apartheid as well, but the reasons could have been overcome if the apartheid government wasn't so corrupt in trying to hold on to all the power. If the apartheid government set up a federal system, we would not be in the problems that we are in. It's as simple as that. If the apartheid government said, okay, fine, we're not going to do this national government nonsense, we're just going to build, we're just going to get everyone to rule themselves in a federalist system, we would literally not have a single problem in this day and age. But that which can be enforced, God offers you an option to choose. EP, so God does give you options. That is right? But God also, in the fact that every human being has the options, right, can choose. In other words, every human being has the right to choose. This means that you are sovereign in your own affairs. So you look, for example, at a Christian. As a Christian, I surrender my sovereignty to make my own decisions to God. This is what it means to submit to the Lord. I submit to Him as Lord and Master of my life, thereby trading in my flawed sovereign will for His perfect sovereign will. So I now live based on His commandments, no longer based on my own choice. But I am a sovereign being insofar as I get to make the choices. I also get to choose Him. And when I choose Him, I surrender those choices. Now, if a man is sovereign over his own choices, it also means that he is sovereign over all of his choices. We establish a government, we give a little bit of our own sovereignty away to that government, right, in order to receive services. But as soon as you have a government that says, no, 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 we will decide who you can marry, we will decide where you can walk, we will decide where you can live, now you have a government that is removing sovereignty, and instead this government is saying, whatever rights you do have comes from us. In our benevolence, we will bestow upon you some rights. So, no, 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 no. I am the only one with rights. I bestow some of my rights upon you as the government in certain areas. Your job is to defend my rights. Not, you don't give me the rights. The right come from God. You just defend some of my rights dependent on the rights that I'm willing to give you in order to perform your duties as the government that I want you to be, right? That's what apartheid did. Apartheid ultimately said, no, 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 you don't understand. We are the givers of rights. And we will decide this group gets these rights, that group gets that right, and that group cannot have this right. And so you don't get to decide that. You are simply a service provider. You don't get to decide who gets what rights. I have the sovereign will to make my own decisions. You just provide the service. That's why we chose you. Right. So from that perspective, I hate apartheid because it did the one thing that I just refused, or that I refused to accept. But fundamentally, everything else is duty, right? So outside of your right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, everything else is duty. You have a duty to own a gun so that you can defend your rights to life, liberty, and happiness. You have a duty to free speech, insofar as you have a duty to speak when a government is trying to take away your right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But these are duties. The modern era makes these rights as if they somehow exist, which is just nonsense. You have duties. And these duties that you have is in order to preserve the rights that God has given you. Um, so that's a nice property you have there. It'd be a shame if a public servant decided to take it. Pretty much, government works for the people, not we work for them, and we allow them to think so. Nick, we allow it. We allow them to think so because of how powerful they've been able to get, right? And it's a slow process. It wasn't an immediate process. It was a very slow process. But as time went on, they were able to ultimately install themselves a strange, mm, into a strange perspective, or into a strange position where they convinced the public that they are the granters of rights. This is my conversation with Martin was exactly that. I have a very, very big hatred of constitutions. I find constitutions to be a joke. And the reason I do is what was meant to be protection against the government has become defense for the government. So if the Constitution says that every citizen has the right to dignity and to equal treatment under the law, what that actually means is that the government can't take your dignity. The government can't remove your equality under the law. It does not mean that your dignity and your equality under the law is a gift from the government. But thanks to the government's interpretation of the Constitution, that's exactly what it became. No, 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 you don't understand. We must, according to the Constitution, provide for the dignity and the equity of all citizens within the country. Well, now the government can do pretty much whatever they want because it's in the Constitution. It's the government's duty to give every citizen dignity. And you and I looked at the pictures of Seshegu. We looked at the pictures of Soweto. We looked at the pictures of Khayelitsha. What dignity? If you can't even pick up your own trash, you no one can give you that dignity. You don't have any. Even if I built you a mansion, you would break it because you don't even respect what little you have. Why would you imagine that you would respect if you had more? But the Constitution says the government needs to make every single person dignified. And so that means there is no limit to the stuff that the government can or cannot do, right? Um, I want to show you guys another, just shifting a little bit to the absolute joke that is South Africa. Okay, so this is a picture that was shared by the Financial Mail. It's still in line with everything we're discussing now, I promise. I just want to show you how absolutely broken our society is. Remember, we spoke about knowledge and wisdom? Yeah, there's not a lot of wisdom in South Africa. But this picture was shared by the Financial Mail because the Financial Mail and another company merged into a single news outlet. And so they shared this meet the team picture. Now, can you guys imagine for 2 seconds in South Africa why people would be very upset and angry over this picture? Rudolph, how are you doing, sir? Nazi style pyramid of complete control and power over you. This is nothing but slavery. So true. Fair, you'd want to be taken care of by professionals with appropriate equipment. Idiots would cut you up on the spot. But knowledgeable people know they can't do something on the spot means wisdom to me. Atomic, you're not wrong. Yeah, it's too white. And trust me when I say this little fact was not lost on South Africans. This little fact was not lost on South Africans. So much so that Financial Mail had to put out a response and say, a note on FM currency and inclusion. The FM and currency teams wanted to address the discussion on social media about the pictures we posted as part of announcing our merger. We got this wrong. The image did not simply create the wrong impression, it reflected a newsroom that is not yet diverse enough, that falls short of what South Africa should expect from an influential business publication and of the standard we have set for ourselves. As we build the combined Financial Mail and currency newsroom, increasing the representation and advancement of Black journalists and editors will be a priority across recruitment, commissioning, mentorship, and leadership. This has prompted a necessary conversation about who tells South Africa's business story, whose perspectives shape coverage, and who sits in the rooms where editorial decisions are made. We have heard the criticism, and we will act on it. Now, does this team actually give a crap about representation and inclusion? No. Look how white they are. This is almost certainly not the first time that they have noticed that their meetings are pretty white. But they are all leftists. And because they're leftists, optics are far more important than reality. See, the truth is that when you open the Financial Mail, all you really care about is that the story you're reading is true. The color of the person writing it is really of no concern. The decision that the Financial Mail has just made means that every future story that they publish, I will take with a grain of salt. Why? Because now I'm not sure if the journalist I'm reading got that job because they were the best for the job or they were simply black enough in order to land the job. If you are a black person in employ for the Financial Mail in the future, you will have to contend with one fundamental fact. You most likely didn't get that job because you were the best suited for it. You got the job because you were born the right skin color, meaning that you don't even know if you were the second, third, fourth, or 100th choice. In fact, you may not even have been chosen if merit was the guiding factor. This to me is something that I will never accept. I would never work for a company if I knew that I only got this job because I'm white and the company needed a white face on the board. To me, this would be insulting. Apparently, the leftists can't really see that. But anyways, that's not the only part of this story. It gets much, much deeper. And for that, we have to go to Varashni Pillay. Now, Varashni is no slouch when it comes to economic racial stories in South Africa. As soon as as soon as there is anything that Varashni can jump on to show the racism of white people, she is on it like white on rice. Um, so Varashni, in her vehement and absolute attack on Financial Mail, decides to post the following. Just I think she meant just so you know, but just casually dropping our newsroom's meet the team pick. We've worked really hard and been deliberate in creating a newsroom that reflects the South Africa we want to serve. Young, black, and incredibly talented. Now, I have a question. Perhaps some of you can help me out. How is an all white newsroom wrong and evil, considering the Financial Mail largely deals with business news, inflation, interest rates, business deals, and all the like? The vast majority of business owners in South Africa are white, not black. So if we're talking about who you want to serve, it makes sense that you would have an all white team of people writing for the Financial Mail, because the vast majority of your readers will be ding, 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 white, because they're the business owners. They're the ones that's being impacted by it. The 28 million SASSA grant recipients are not reading the Financial Mail. What would that mean for them? The Financial Mail is going to tell them whether their SASSA grant is at the post office or some other office that they get on Facebook. So ultimately, if we're talking about who you want to serve, then it makes sense that the Financial Mail would be all white. But in a country like South Africa, having an all white room is considered pure evil, to the point where this company has to be hounded and attacked until they promise to change it. But why is it not pure evil to have an all black newsroom? Now, when I asked that question on X, I received a number of people that told me, well, you don't understand. The demographics of the country means that if you have an all white newsroom, you went out of your way to exclude black people from your business. Whereas if you have an all black news team, that's just demographics. To which my argument would immediately be, that's not true. You can't use the demographics of the country to determine the demographics of journalism. I realize being a journalist isn't the highest of barriers of entry, but there's still a degree involved in it. And you still need to have the ability to speak English. You still need to have the ability to write in English. And you have to have some economic knowledge in order to be a journalist. I believe if you look at those demographics, you'd probably find that it isn't 90-10, as a lot of these leftists want to believe. But nevertheless, that misses the point of what we're actually talking about. You see, because the issue here is an issue of a lack of diversity within the newsroom. That's the core issue. The white team isn't diverse enough. But by that very same metric, the black team is as diverse as the white team insofar as they're all black. Why is it then that zero diversity, all white, is evil, but zero diversity, all black, is good? Excellent. Perfect. So happy to see that. See, when people talk about the persecution and the discrimination of white people in South Africa, this is what is talked about. This is what the leftists will not tell you. This is what the leftists will pretend isn't actually happening. An all white team is evil, wicked, and should be shut down immediately. Everyone should be fired. An all black team is perfectly fine. When the Springboks is a little bit too white, every single person and their mother speaks about it. But the fact that Bafana is all black is celebrated. How is that anything other than discrimination? And then it leads me to, I think, my biggest point. Why is it only Afrikaners and white South Africans that are expected to share? Because, by the way, I did a little thing, and I researched explain.co.za. That's Pelé's company. Guess who funds her little website? It's all white businesses, by the way. If it wasn't for white people, Pelé would be an unknown. No one would know her name. She would surely not get by on her talent. I can tell you that. Um, Financial Mail was built by white people. It's financed by white corporations. What I want to know is why is it that only white people must share in this country? When black people don't want to share, when you have hundreds of black only organizations, black only businesses, and those are perfectly fine, no one raises a word. But when white people want to do it, suddenly we have to think about the entire country. Suddenly now, like we need to think about the history of our country. Well, the history of our country, if I were to consider it, is the problem of race and the fact that race is made a common denominator determining who can and cannot work somewhere. Well, it seems to me that that's exactly what the left is doing. They're the ones pushing this racist trope upon the people of South Africa. They're the ones whittling down people to nothing more than their skin color. You'll note, by the way, that when you look at these black faces on the screen in front of you, nothing is said about their qualifications. Nothing is said about their skills. Nothing is said about the fact that they might belong there. Instead, the focus is on them being black. That's it. Them being black is apparently enough. It's all that matters. Share because the white guy living under a bridge has more privileges than Ramaphosa, asked the leftist media. It's an unfair scenario. It really is. I just quickly I want to see something that I just thought about. I want to show you very quickly how absolutely a Turks Faye with the 5 community subs. Sir, really appreciate you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You are far too kind. Really appreciate that. Chantal Pretorius, how you doing? Wit besighede wat dit ondersteun lê onder white guilt. Ek sien dit oral in die wêreld. You're Chantal, you're absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct. I think white guilt is one of the biggest injustices that white people can ever visit upon the black nations of Africa. And I genuinely mean that. If you coddle someone, if you tell someone you're a little perfect snowflake and life is brilliant and perfect and pure and everything that's wrong with you is someone else's mistake, you, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the allegory or the parable of the moth. Well, it's real, by the way. But when a moth is escaping the cocoon, you should not help that moth. And the reason you shouldn't help the moth is in the struggle to escape, the moth's muscles in the wings is actually being developed. If you help the moth, if you cut open the cocoon and let the moth out, that moth will never fly because the wings did not develop the way that it should. If you consistently tell black people in South Africa that every failure is someone else's failure, that everything that's wrong with them is someone else's problem, what you're doing is cutting off the wings of the black nations of South Africa. The ability to take responsibility, to say, I and I alone are in charge of my successes. I need to work hard. I need to achieve this because no one is going to give it to me. What we have done in this country, what the ANC has done, and what leftists has done, is they have created a black nation that are addicted to government handouts. The vast majority of black people in South Africa don't know how to exist on their own. They don't know. If the post office does not give them money every single month, they don't know what else to do. That's what they do. The government must give me a job. The government must give me a paycheck. The government must take care of me. The government must provide me with a house. As soon as you do that, very quickly you realize that those people become invalids, absolutely and totally incapable of taking care of themselves. But I want to show you how what's the word I'm looking for? Unimpressive these people are. So this is Varashni Pilay's official X account. She has 72,000 followers. Now, when you look at my account, right, I'll quickly go over to my account. I have about 3,498 followers, so much less than her. You look at my likes, and I'll get on smaller posts. I'll usually, this is a new-ish post, so by the end of the day, this post will probably sit around 30 to 40. But then you look and you see 102. There's a 41. There's a 74 one, 77, 162, 22. Some smaller, some bigger, but almost every single day, I will have a post that gets well over 100 likes. Well over 100 likes every single day. Here's Varashni Pillay. Now, if you look at similar people to Varashni who are actually impressive, at 72K followers, every single post gets well over 100, well over 1,000, some even as high as 10,000 likes on every single post. Here's Varashni. 40 minutes ago, she has one like. 1 hour ago, about 124 likes. That's similar to mine. These were reposts, so we won't pay attention to those. Here she is, 265 likes. This is on her sharing her big story of her news team. 161 likes, 1 like, 2 likes, 63 likes, 41 likes, 242 likes, 29 likes, 4 likes, 51 likes. My point is not to bring down Varashni. It's not the point. My point is, these are painfully average people. If you removed the white corporate money from Varashni's career, Varashni has no career. No one cares. Varashni lives her life, most likely making noise on Facebook, and maybe her friends, maybe her parents think she's very special, but no one else really cares. Varashni without white monopoly capital goes nowhere. Varashni without George Soros's open society goes nowhere. Because in one of the most, and the reason I bring up something like X, the reason this matters is X and YouTube are they are the perfect representation of the free market. They're the perfect representation of the free market. I cannot force any of you to watch my videos. I can ask you to like my videos and maybe share my videos, but I can't force you to watch them. I can't force any of you to become patrons, to become YouTube members, or to donate or whatever. I can't force anything on you. All I can do is make content and then trust and hope that that content is good enough that you actually want to watch it. That's literally all I can do. This is why what you see on YouTube is that those who are good enough rises to the top. Those who actually provide value rises to the top. And those who do not they sink to the bottom. And yeah, that can be slow, that can be fast, it can happen overnight, it cannot happen. Like there's no way of actually knowing. But in time, given enough time, you will ultimately end up in a situation where those who are worthwhile and those who have something impressive to say go to the top where people can listen to them. Um, quickly want to see something. Let's go to YouTube. And let's go News 24. There we go. Okay, so we have News 24 here. News 24's YouTube channel. They have over 1 million subscribers, by the way. News 24. Here you have one of their videos, the most recent one, 1.2K views. Then you have Real Politicky or Politicky, 222 views, 258 views, 4K views, 58K views, 295 views, 895 views. Where's their on the record? Here we go. On the record, Chris Papas, 3.5K views. Where's the on the record that we had with Sneyman? Adrian Basson, 40K views. This is a million subscriber channel, by the way. Here's the first video that I've seen that has cracked 100,000. 1 million subscribers. This is the first video I see on their page, and that's 3 weeks ago. They managed to crack 100,000. I wouldn't even go so far as to say that it's paid subscribers. I personally think what you see there is a group of people that are so incredibly unimpressive that if you were to remove the white monopoly capital, because remember, News 24 is funded wholly by Naspers, which in turn is funded mostly by Rupert. And a lot of their funding also comes from the Open Society org, the Open Society network. That's George Soros and globalist money. They're also receiving quite a lot of funding from what used to be USAID, which of course now has disappeared. It's interesting that News 24 last year lost a crap ton of money. In fact, it lost millions upon millions, hundreds of millions of rands. USAID being revoked could maybe have had something to do with that amount of losses. Who knows? What I mean to say is, Adrian Basson, without white monopoly capital behind him that effectively pays him to do a bad job, would not have any significance. These people have no actual value in society, not in what they're doing currently. I'm not suggesting here that Adrian Basson couldn't be a valuable member of society. He could, absolutely. But he isn't one at the moment. I'll show you another example of something that is currently happening in South Africa. I've wanted to make videos on this, but other things came in that was more important. Let me show you what I'm looking for, or looking at rather. Um, Here we go. Have you guys seen this? So Runa Landman is one of the people involved with a group called Afrikaners vir SA, Afrikaners for South Africa. And as it turns out, Afrikaners for South Africa is funded by George Soros. And it is actually what it looks like, at least from the outside, is a Durko operation. Here we go. These guys. It looks like it's a Durko operation. This group comes out of nowhere. It starts to attack South Africans and Afrikaners. It starts making up lies about Afrikaners, left, right, and center. The group legitimately comes out of nowhere, and suddenly it has money. Suddenly, it just seems to be everywhere. It meets with the ambassador to America, Jew Monopoly Capital. David, so I will just sort of I will say here, when we talk of George Soros, be very careful to equate George Soros to Jews. George Soros was a Jew that sold out his own people during Nazi occupied Germany. He is not a good guy, right? And he's not even like remotely connected to the Jews. In fact, George Soros is himself hated by most Jews. He is in no way, shape, or form a favorite of anyone, right? And I think there is a tendency to, we like easy answers as humans. And so when we see a problem, we immediately think to ourselves, well, this person must be behind it, right? And in my opinion, Jews have become an easy punching bag in recent years to sort of everything that's wrong with the world. We just go, oh, it's Jews. It must be the Jews. Most people don't even realize that what their hatred is for Jewish people are actually fueled by Muslims. Like, well, most people don't even realize that. The vast majority of propaganda that you see, or vast majority of negative things that you see about Jews, are pushed by Islamic extremists. There's an article, actually, I'll show you. Let me see if I can find it quickly. So I'm on this tab. I was reading it last night. Where is that story? The Common Saints had an entire article showing you how the entire manufacturing of the Middle East and the Gaza war was, in fact, just complete fabrication. I may have missed. I may have missed it. Let me see if I can quickly go over, because it's on my email somewhere. Let me see if I can find it for you guys quickly. It's not in this one. Is it this one? No. This one, South Africa should follow America 30 years ago. China's warning the news that's what to print. Not this one. How about this one? Oh man, now I'm not going to be able to find that story. Watch me struggling to find this bloody story. Hold up. Let me see if I can Google it. I'm trying to look for it. Give me a moment. Could it be this one? I'm not sure. Let's see. Let's look together. It's one of these stories. Was the outcome of the meeting with the American ambassador nothing, Andre? Like no one really paid attention to it. It's definitely not this story. Come on, man. Where the hell did they have this story again? Give me the foreign desk. This is where I want to be. Foreign desk. How do I get to their foreign desk? Because I'm pretty sure it's one of their journalists that actually put out this entire breakdown of all of the lies that people see about go to global. America's most toxic. It's worry South Korea. Is Russia winning the information war in South Africa? Is the world wrong about jihadism? Is London, South Africa spy jailed in US? El Salvador, South Africa. World news. The world is warming, but that is not a problem. China doing better. Britain has run Europe's net zero. South Africa. Trump claims Iran deal imminent. Iran war update. Malays economic. Was it Newsday? I'm pretty sure it was a Newsday. It can't have been Newsday, but maybe it was Newsday. Oh, goodness sake, man. I'm now going to stick to this until I show you that damn article. Just give me a moment. I'm getting there. Where's my Newsday? Where do my Newsday articles go? Is it Oscar? I don't think so. Maybe it is this one. Hold up. Okay, it's not this one. If I can't find it now, I'll give it to you guys tomorrow. I'll go look for it until I find it. Yeah, no, I'll have to go look for this now. Summer will be warming. Dylan, how you doing, bro? It is cooling. There is no warming globally. Yo yo. Digitmark, how you doing, sir? Check ground news. Atomic, I'll have to go check. I don't know where I read the article, but I literally read it yesterday morning, and it was actually fascinating because effectively what the article said was, the UN has this official number of journalists that have been killed in inside Gaza by Israel. Wait, I think I've known. I think I may have found. Oh, here we go. I found it, boys. I found it. I found the story. Just needed to know where to look. I just needed to know where to look. There we go. There we go. Okay, so the story here, the South African billionaire heiress at the center of an international media controversy, depending on how you want to pronounce that. But here's what it actually points to. So you have the um, I'll just quickly read this for you guys. Sunif issued a statement condemning what it described as the continued assassination and brutal murder of journalists. Its chairperson declared that the killings were an evil assault on press freedom and human rights. The vigils were attended not only by journalists, but also by a range of anti Israel activist groups. Many participants were Palestinian Kiefis, however the hell you want to pronounce that, and carried signs reading "Journalists Against Genocide," while banners explained what organizers described as Israel's war on journalists. Much of the impetus for these protests came from statistics published by the Committee to Protect Journalists. At the time, August 2025, the organization claimed that approximately 1,500 journalists were working in Gaza and that 190 had been killed since the start of the war, making it the deadliest conflict on record for journalists. These figures have been widely cited by media organizations and advocacy groups as evidence that Israel has deliberately targeted journalists. The CPJ has also been relied upon in reporting other highly controversial allegations, including claims of that Israeli soldiers used dogs to grape Palestinian prisoners. These assertions immediately raised questions. Gaza is governed by Hamas, a regime that functions somewhere between a dictatorship and a theocracy, where freedom of expression is tightly controlled. International journalists have generally been barred from entering the Strip, much as they were excluded from the front lines of the war in Ukraine. This naturally prompted an obvious question: where were all of these journalists coming from? Nor were concerns about reporting from Gaza new. As far back as 2014, a former Associated Press journalist, Matty Friedman, published a widely read essay arguing that international media organizations not only framed the conflict in particular anti Israel ways, but also censored reporting from Gaza because of intimidation by Hamas. Now, the rest of the article actually goes into highlighting all of the nonsense. So listen to this. Investigative journalist David Collier examined the CPJ's list of journalists killed in Gaza, comparing those named with publicly available social media profiles and other open source information. According to his investigation, roughly half of those listed openly expressed support for or associations with prescribed terrorist organizations. Now, it's important to understand that if you are a journalist in accordance with international law, you cannot be a member of a terrorist or active military organization. So if you're a journalist, you can't also be a soldier. These journalists, half of this list of people that they say have been targeted or killed by Israel, are active members of Hamas and Al Qaeda and ISIS. So, first, big problem. Around a quarter appeared not to have worked as a journalist at all. instead including occupations such as a graphic designer employed by a public relations firm, a builder, or an unemployed individual. So just a quarter of the entire 1,500 list aren't even journalists. Collier further argued that many of those listed had died while at home rather than while carrying out journalistic work. Others were reportedly killed alongside senior members of terrorist organizations, including one individual who died in the home of a Palestinian Islamic Jihad commander. In another instance, the CPJ mistakenly listed a blogger from the United Arab Emirates as having died in Gaza. He identified numerous other errors, duplications, and entries that appear to rely heavily on information originating from Hamas itself with little independent verification. Now, I read all of this to you because this is exactly what is happening all throughout the world with every single story coming out of the Middle East. As soon as there is a story coming out of the Middle East, and this is sort of part of a bigger phenomenon that I don't have a name for, but every single person on earth right now knows that the mainstream media lies, except when the mainstream media says exactly what we want to hear. And I have this in my own family. I have family members who hate the mainstream media, except the mainstream media tells them that Israel is committing a genocide in Gaza. Well, yeah, 100. I mean, they're wrong about everything else, but this is the one true story that they posted. I mean, a normal logic test tells you that Israel is not committing a genocide in Gaza. Like, just logic. You don't even have to look at anything else. Just use your brain. Just logically think about this, and you realize there's no genocide in Gaza. There is a war, by the way, that the Palestinians started, but there is no genocide. If genocide was the goal, it would have been very quick. It's not hard to kill a bunch of people that effectively lives on a rock, right? Like, that would not have been hard. Everything that you hear from the Middle East are told to you by communist jihadists. That's it. That's everything you hear. Now, I again need to make this clear. I said the exact same thing to Matthew when I spoke to him. I'm not a Zionist. I could not care less whether Israel survives or dies. It doesn't matter to me. Israel is on the other side of the world as far as I'm concerned. Who gives a crap? In every war, I will take the side based on what is happening on the ground. And if you ask me to choose between a backward Islamic hellhole and Israel, I'm going to choose Israel. Because at least it's not the Islamic hellhole. Right? But that has nothing to do with the fact that they're Jews or Zionism or Jerusalem or whatever. I couldn't care less about that stuff. I care about the fact that this is a good, relatively good country versus a very bad and evil country, from my perspective. But hey, if it changes tomorrow, if Israel decided to start attacking Germany or started to attack America, I would be on the side of America and say, yeah, kick those guys in the nuts. I don't care. I'm not interested in the survival of some Middle Eastern country. That doesn't bother me. I take every single war in that area 100% based on the relative terms within which that war is fought. The enemy of our friend is not, in fact, our friend. Based, right? It reveals all the mechanisms that the apparatus of propaganda, just like COVID did for a lot of people, and 100% agree. Hellhole isn't a good aspiration. No. Soros made it to 100 compounded interest, the rate bull and rate bull too. I think people need to be very, very. I think people need to be more discerning, and people need to be careful. It is very easy for us to fall for propaganda when the propaganda confirms our own bias. And I myself, I'm party to this. I will sometimes read an article and I'll be like, "Whoa, you look at what these guys have been doing." I mean, I fact check the article just so that I can make a video on it, and I realize, okay, there's no story here because what they say happened and what actually happened isn't the same thing. It's not the same thing. They're telling me how to think about the story. And when I actually read the story, I realize there's no story actually here. So always be careful. If you read any story in the news and you immediately go, oh, I believe it, that's when you need to go, wait, let me go check this. And I'll be honest, it's very difficult to check because in this story that I shared with you from the Common Sense, it turns out that that one CPJ report that was just flawed beyond belief, that CPJ report wasn't even publicly available. They refused to make it publicly available until they were so pressed that they had no other option but to make the list available. And then people found out that after it emerged that a number of those people are actually active Hamas terrorists, they edited the list quietly. People actually used the Wayback Machine to go, wait, you guys just removed a bunch of names. Like as soon as it came out that these were terrorists, you removed the names, but you never actually changed the story. You kept claiming that 1,500,000 or 1,500 journalists have been killed in Gaza, but those numbers are fraudulent. You just quietly remove those names from the list. So the list is much smaller now, but your number, by the way, South Africa, the official stance of the ANC is still that Israel has killed 1,500 reporters in Gaza. Even though the organization that originally claimed it no longer believes that it was 1,500. They now know that most of those that were killed were terrorists. This is how the left operates. This is exactly how they operate. They feed a story that they know is wrong. They know it's BS, but it doesn't matter because I just need to be first. If I can give you the BS story and I can make you buy the BS story, it doesn't matter what comes after, right? If I have to admit afterwards I lied, this is one of the things that I've become a lot more careful about. In the beginning of my YouTube channel, I made 2 apology videos. 2. And they're still up. You can go watch them. I was forced to apologize twice for things that I said in a video that turned out to be wrong. Now, the second time was not actually my fault. The second time, information came out initially, and that's all we knew. And as I published my video about an hour later, new information came out that changed the story completely. But we didn't have that information at the time of making the video. And so I was forced to put out what I knew. But I made 2 apology videos on my channel. Guess what? The original videos received almost 100,000 views per video. The apology videos could not even reach 5,000. I think the one is on like 5,000 views. This means that and I changed everything. I even changed the original video's titles to show correction, and then I linked the correction to the video so that people can immediately see there's a correction on this video. That means that out of the 100,000 people that saw the one wrong video, 95,000 of them walk around today no idea what the truth is. They don't know because the information is wrong. You see, that's the point. I just need to be first. If I can convince you this is the truth, you'll believe it. And then whatever else happens, it doesn't matter. You're not going to see it. You've already read that story. You now believe this lie. News have not been news in a very long time. It's just opinions and propaganda. Chantal, you're definitely not wrong, but I also would say I don't necessarily think that news has ever really been news. I think we live in a world where I think we live in a world where we want to believe in that there was once a a good world where the news was actually shared and the truth was actually told. I don't think that world ever existed. I think what happened was because information traveled incredibly slowly, you believed whatever you were told, and there was no way for you to know that that wasn't true. How were you going to ask? Whereas today, because we're far more connected and we have far more information far more readily available, because I can go on X and within an instant I can see what the truth is. Viewers will DM me with stories. These things happen in real time. It's become much harder for those on the left and those in power to lie their way to success. It's harder for them to actually control the story. This is one of the reasons why the South African government is so hard up on not allowing Starlink into the country and instead have satellite internet be the government's internet. Because if it's the government's internet, the government can also control what you get to see and what you don't get to see. Righty, was good seeing you again, alive and well doing. Have a good day and catch you at another time. Take care of yourself, Digit. Thank you so much for hanging out. I really appreciate you. Timing your plant could save you everything. The winners write the story and the lovers get wiped out. Dylan, so that's also not entirely true. Um, so one of the beliefs is that uh, uh, history is written by the victors, which actually, as it turns out, is almost never the truth. So, in almost every single historical event that we're aware of, we have as many sources from the losers as we have from the winners and from third parties. So, people who weren't involved but still saw what was actually happening. Moreover, and one of the things, and this isn't really, I'm not really trying to say you're wrong, because there is an element of truth to history is written by the victors. But what often happens is the victors at the time don't really think that they're doing anything wrong. You take, for example, ancient Rome. In ancient Rome, uh, Julius Caesar invades Gaul, modern day France. He ends up killing 1 million Frenchmen and enslaving 1 million more. He brings with him 1 million Gaul slaves, and 1 million Gauls are dead in his invasion of France. And they celebrate it. I mean, the philosophers and the historians writing about this, they're like, look how powerful and majestic we are. We are incredible. We went in there and we absolutely kicked the living crap out of them, you know? And because nowadays, right, slavery is super wrong, but for them, slavery was just a way of life. Everyone had a slave. It doesn't even matter, so who cared? Um, Shemaine, how you doing? The Bible says we have to pray for Israel. Shemaine, I would be very careful in terms of, so for example, when the Bible says pray for Israel, in the New Testament, there are multiple times where Israel is merely the word that they use for the church. Right? And there's a good reason for it. Paul actually makes the argument in Hebrews. I believe it's Hebrews. But Paul makes the argument that as Israel was the chosen people of God, with the new covenant, with Christ coming, the chosen people of God becomes the church of Jesus Christ. And so Israel is sort of allegorically tied to the church, as in the church becomes the new chosen people of God. And so when it says pray for Israel, what he's referring to in context there, and it's important to read the whole of the context, is pray for the church of Jesus Christ. Um, Now, in terms of praying, we should be praying for everyone, right? We should be praying for Israel and for Netanyahu to have wisdom and to act in a way that is in accordance with righteousness and justice. We should pray for Hamas that they let go of their hatred and that they find Jesus Christ. We should pray for Trump. We should pray for the new, whoever the hell the new guy is in the UK. They've had so many, it's impossible to keep up. We should pray for Ramaphosa, right? We should pray for uh, Gweri Mantashi. We should pray for Balula. We should pray for people, and I fully agree with that. But I am not a new dispensationalist, right? Or rather, a dispensationalist. I don't believe that Israel is still the chosen people of God. I believe that Israel was always a stand-in for the ministry of Christ. And when Christ came, the church became the chosen people of God because that was always what God wanted. Israel was told to go out and proselytize the nations. Israel didn't do that. Israel instead became very inward looking, looking only to themselves, caring only about themselves. They became sort of very arrogant in their own belief as the special people of God. And the point was, the Great Commission was supposed to be for the whole world. Israel failed in doing that. And so when Christ comes and establishes his new church, it is the Great Commission given to us. Now go and make disciples of all of the nations. So I'm very careful when it comes to this. Oh, as Christians, we have a duty towards Israel. As Christians, I have a duty towards righteousness. That's what I have a duty towards. I have a duty towards Christ. And wherever Christ is preached, there I have a duty towards that. Wherever righteousness is upheld, I have a duty towards that. Wherever wickedness is upheld, I have a duty to speak out against it. But I don't necessarily believe that I myself have a duty towards Israel. Um, I believe that what we should be doing as Christians is praying for Jews that they come to faith, that they get to know Jesus Christ. Absolutely, we must. Um, but I don't adhere to anything more than that. Almost all sins are cycles that create conflict that never ends. If you give in, just spread it. You don't defeat it. The rich take what they want, and the poor suffer what they must. Very Roman of you. The Jews are not good people. They hate us just as much as the Muslims do. Jock, again, I will just say, I would caution against um I would caution against the idea of Jews aren't good people. The vast majority of Jews are just normal folk, just normal people going to synagogues, living their lives. The overwhelming majority of the Jews that most people look to and say these are evil Jews in charge of the banking system and whatnot aren't even Jews. And what I mean by that is they don't practice the faith. They are what is known as cultural Jews. They don't have anything to do with Jewishness. They couldn't care less. They're just sort of Jewish insofar as they were born in a Jewish family. And so, they happen to be in positions that grant them incredible access. And a big part of that is just how Jews are raised, right? They work together, they help each other out. There's a huge bit of the Bible that really helps the Jews to get ahead fast. And so, yes, you look at all of these Jews that own media conglomerates and media companies in Hollywood. Sure, there's a lot of Jews that own it, but there's millions more Jews that don't own Hollywood, right? And that don't have anything to do with Hollywood. So I would always caution against just blanketing a whole group and saying this group is super evil. Now, when you do that, for example, to Islam, I don't do it to individual Muslims. I do it to Islam. And I say I am skeptical of Islam because of what Islam is. So I'm very skeptical of people telling me there are moderate Muslims. Not insofar as I don't believe that there are moderate Muslims. I do believe that there are moderate Muslims. The problem is that when the extremist Muslims finally establish their jihad and their caliphate, who will the moderate Muslims follow? Will they stand with the Christians and the Jews and the ordinary people that don't want the caliphate, or will they stand with the caliphate? And in that, the answer is, according to the Quran, they must stand with the caliphate. It would be heretical for them not to, right? So in that, I have a problem with Islam that does extend to all Muslims, but I don't necessarily see the same problem with Judaism, right? Because even the Jews, like the Christians, don't have the right to violently convert an entire group of people. Sarah, how are you doing? You're referring to the passage in the Bible that says those who bless Israel will be blessed and those who curse Israel will be cursed. Right, Sarah? All right. So it comes from specifically Genesis 12:3, right? Those that bless Israel will be blessed. Those that curse will be cursed. Okay. So it comes from Genesis 3. Yeah. God is speaking to Abraham. Now, what is it exactly that God tells Abraham? God tells him that your descendants will number as the sand of the beach, right? But there's another part of the prophecy that God gives Abraham, and that is that the Savior will be born. The King of Kings will be born from his line. God speaks to David, the King of the Jews, and God tells him that in you I will establish your throne forever. Right? Your descendants, specifically your descendant, one descendant, will rule the throne forever. That wasn't Solomon. That wasn't any of David's children, because they all died. None of them lived forever. So what is God talking about? When God speaks of Abraham and tells him that you will be the hope of the nations and your seed will be the hope of the nations. When he talks to David and says, your bloodline, someone in your bloodline, one of your children will be the king forever. What exactly is God talking about? God is talking about Jesus Christ. God is talking about his church. When Jesus comes to redeem Israel. Israel is the one that rejects him, and Jesus then establishes his church. And it's interesting when you listen to it's in Jeremiah where God speaks about the covenant, and God says, I will form a new covenant with them, one in which I am their God and they are my people, and I will see their sins no more. No more will man teach another man, for it will be written upon their hearts. That verse, those who bless Israel will be blessed, and those who curse Israel will be cursed. That verse depends on your particular interpretation of who Israel is following the coming and the death and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. If you are a dispensationalist, right? You believe, and by the way, there's plenty of Christians who I have tremendous respect for who are dispensationalists. John MacArthur is a good example of a dispensationalist. The dispensationalists believe that Israel is still the chosen people of God and that Jesus Christ's church is also the chosen people of God. But Israel still has their own path that they have to walk with God, And at some point, God is going to judge them and they will discover Jesus and they will come to faith. John MacArthur was a famous dispensationalist. Then you have the other side, also Christian, but they believe that Israel was always meant to be the nation from which the Savior comes, Jesus Christ. And when Jesus Christ comes, he says, and on this rock, Peter, I will establish my church. In other words, the people, Israel, now becomes the church, Israel. It's still God's people, but it is now the people of the church of Jesus Christ. Those are now the people. So now that passage means something completely different, right? If you're reading it as the church is Israel and Israel is the church, now that passage simply reads, those who bless the church of Jesus Christ will be blessed, and those that curse the church of Jesus Christ will be cursed. So it depends. It's theology matters, right? And doctrine matters. And it matters, how do we read the Bible? These are debates that's been raging for hundreds of years. So you and I are not going to solve this debate in a single stream. I'm not intelligent enough to be doing that. But I do know the dispensationalist approach. I know those who completely reject dispensationalism. And I know those who are sympathetic to both. And I would say I am largely sympathetic to both. But in my current scenario, in my current sort of belief, I don't adhere to the dispensationalist view. Jesus Christ says, I am the way, the truth, and the light. No one comes to the Father except through me. That includes every single Jew. Jesus does not go on to say, except, of course, for the Jews. Jesus says, I am the truth, the way, and the life. No one comes to the Father. No one. No Jew, no Greek, no black, no white, no purple, no colored. No one comes to the Father except through me. No Hindu, no Jew, no Muslim, no Zoroanist, Zoroanist, I don't even know how to pronounce that word, no Buddhist. Not a single person comes to the Father except through Jesus Christ. That's what I believe, because that's what Jesus said. Yeah, Zoroastrian. Thank you. Yes, Zoroastrian. Rora, how you doing? I follow one rule, the 10 Commandments rolled up into one. Jock, that's not really what the 10 Commandments is rolled up into. So the 10 Commandments isn't about don't be a D. The 10 Commandments is about who do you serve. That's what they're rolled up into. Who do you serve? If you serve your sin, you are a slave to your sin. If you serve Christ and God, then you are a slave to God and righteousness. But of the only commandment that you can probably say don't be a D is the one that says treat your neighbor as you would yourself, or love thy neighbor as you would love yourself. But then the question immediately becomes, well, how much do you love yourself? Do you even know what love is? If you don't know he who is love, do you know what love is? Do you know what it means not to be a D, using your own words? Are you aware of your own incapability of understanding what it means to not be a D? It gets deep when you really start thinking about it. So yeah, how you doing, sir? Okay, but Jesus' new covenant never came to abolish what happened in the New Testament, but to uphold the law of God. As a church, is Israel as the church is also people of Israel. So it becomes confusing. So Sarah, when Jesus says, I did not come to abolish the law of God, but to fulfill it, right? To fulfill it means something. So the law of God, when you actually read what God tells Abraham, and Paul goes through this in in Hebrews, excuse me. We think Paul may have written Hebrews, but even if you don't agree, the writer of Hebrews goes through this in painstaking detail, and he effectively lays out what the Jews got wrong about the law of God. The law of God was about relationship. What God wanted from his people was relationship, that they would seek him with all their heart and all their might, and that in him they would find forgiveness of their sins. Their faith would forgive their sins, not the sacrifices that they made. Instead, what the writer of Hebrews describes and explains is that the law of God became sin to the Jews, because through the law, the accuser, that is Satan, could manifest sin within their hearts. So the sinful nature of man grabbed onto the law of God and effectively worked sin within that law. So when Jesus says, I did not come to replace the law of God, what is he talking about? First and foremost, we have to differentiate. So you have about 100 and something laws that are given as governmental laws. That's not God's law. That's not what it talks about. So the whole book of Leviticus has nothing to do with this. Those are just setting up a government and running a country. That's basically all that is. That's not God's law. God's law is the Ten Commandments, right? And the point of the Ten Commandments was at its core to have relationship with God. And that's what Jesus means when he says, I did not come to abolish it. Because if Jesus came to abolish the Ten Commandments, what that effectively would mean is Jesus came to abolish relationship with God, which is insane, since Jesus is here to buy us from our wickedness into relationship with God. Right? That's the whole point of Jesus coming. So of course, Jesus can't abolish the law, because the law is about relationship with God. And so Jesus fulfills the law, meaning the punishment of the law. Jesus pays that price so that we can now have relationship with our Father. Right? That's the point that God makes in Jeremiah when he says, and I will form a new covenant with them, one in which I will be their God and they will be my people, and I will see their sins no more. I will write my law upon their hearts, so that no man has to teach another man what they can and cannot do. They will just know it, because my law will be on their hearts. They will love me because it is in their heart to love me. That's what Jesus means when he says, I did not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. Shining, it's over. Forgive them who worship the sun. They have reason. One volcanic eruption could wipe out billions. We are in the hands of the Almighty. Oh, be absolutely true. When youngsters see so many happy, does about they know no better and also become okay? So I won't say the word, but I think young people are. I think young people struggle in the modern era quite heavily. Uh, Mostly, I think, because of a severe lack of knowledge, but also because the foundations of what it means to be a person has been completely eradicated, and young people are desperately trying to find themselves. Um, my generation had new atheism, and atheism was big. I just watched a podcast this morning where a guy said the modern Gen Z. Do we have any Gen Z in chat? I highly doubt it, but if there are any Gen Z in chat, so people probably younger than 30, um, the young people today are fascinated with the occult, with witchcraft and white witchcraft and black witchcraft and Satanism. Even is a big thing currently amongst young people, and the reason for it is that most people look at the world and realize that there is something more. They might not be able to describe it, but they realize there must be something more because the material only world brings nothing but misery. If you believe that this is just material and there is nothing more to it, it just leads to misery. It does not lead to happiness. We came and we told young women, have as much sex as you want, live your best life. And now they're killing themselves at 4 times the rate. 1 in every 5 young women are on antidepressants or some kind of ADHD or some kind of medication to just try and cope with the world around them. We told young men it's okay not to grow up. Young men are committing suicide at astronomical rates. Young men are going through all sorts of questionings about what their sexuality actually is supposed to mean, diving into all manner of crazy stuff, trying to find something of meaning. Because the natural world does a pretty good job of being natural, but it doesn't ascribe meaning. And people are desperate for it. This is why so many young people grab onto communism and follow it as a faith because it at least provides a modicum of meaning. What is the meaning of your life? Well, I'm going to bring prosperity to the poor. That's at least something. Of course, it won't provide happiness, but it's better than the alternative, which is, well, I have nothing. Luckily, God is in control, and that will ultimately it will ultimately get better. I have to believe that. I do believe that with all my heart. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, I am going to love and leave you. This has been a fun conversation. I think we've gone through more topics in this one than, well, in a long time. So I really do appreciate all of you for coming out, for hanging out, for spending your time with me. Thank you so much to everyone that donated. Thank you so much to everyone that super chatted, to everyone that gifted subs. Really appreciate you for the financial support and the incredible support that all of you give every single day by liking videos, by subscribing. I truly appreciate you. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, be good to each other, be kind to each other, and I'll see all of you in the next one. Peace.